Did you know the pyramids of Giza may not just be in Egypt, but at the only place on Earth that could open a doorway to the stars? At dawn, the camera glides over the Giza Plateau. The desert is still blue with night. The Great Pyramid rises out of the mist, its lines aligned with a horizon that has watched over pharaohs for thousands of years. The Nile glows like a silver vein to the east. The last stars fade above. It feels carefully staged, almost too precise. Most of us grew up believing they built here for simple reasons. High ground near the capital, solid limestone bedrock, easy access to workers and quarries, convenient, practical, almost accidental. But old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, this was not just a good construction site. It was a chosen point in a living map that joined earth, sky, and the underworld. Modern explanations talk about logistics. Yet, when we step back, a different pattern appears. The pyramids sit on the west bank of the Nile, the side of the setting sun, where Egyptians placed their cities of the dead. To the east, life and sunrise. To the west, the afterlife and descent. This was the border between worlds, a cosmic shoreline where pharaohs and priests believed the soul began its journey through the duat. Was this plateau picked as a kind of gate? Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. Now, imagine overlaying the night sky of 2500 BC onto this landscape. The three great pyramids are not in a straight line. One is slightly offset. On the ground, that looks strange. In the sky, it looks familiar. The pattern mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt, the constellation linked with Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. If the Nile echoes the curve of the Milky Way, then Giza becomes a precise marker in a vast celestial mirror. As above, so below. But what really happened when those two reflections met? Did you know this plateau also stands near the geographical heart of the old world landmasses? To some, that is coincidence. To the mystery schools of Egypt, it may have been a power node, a stable altar of stone anchored to the planet itself. The massive limestone bedrock holds the weight of millions of blocks with almost no settling. Perfect for a monument or for an instrument. Because what if these pyramids were not just tombs, but ritual machines? Their causeways point toward ancient Heliopolis, the great solar temple. Nearby sites like Saqqara and Memphis line up in a hidden geometry, as if the entire region was scripted into a map of the duat on Earth. Causeways as pathways, chambers as rehearsal spaces for the soul. Old legends tell a different story about what mattered most. They say the priests guarded the secret of why here more fiercely than how the stones were raised. Techniques could be copied, but the true location, the exact alignment, that was the key to the initiation journey. What kind of knowledge could make a patch of desert this dangerous to reveal? And most importantly, what were they really trying to open on this plateau? We'll find out together as we follow the hidden map of Giza's forbidden location. Framing the enigma, what were the priests protecting? What were they really trying to open on this plateau? To answer that, we have to pull the camera back, not just from the pyramid, from the whole landscape. Why the west bank of the Nile at all? Why this exact ton of limestone when there were hundreds of kilometers of empty desert waiting in every direction? Why carve a stone mountain here and then aim it with surgical precision at a handful of stars? Modern engineers talk about logistics, quarries, and bedrock, but old legends tell a different story. They hint that the priests were not just building monuments, they were guarding a crossing point, a place where three worlds could touch: the solid earth under our feet, the glittering sky above, and the invisible realm of the duat in between. Did you know the Egyptians saw the Nile as a mirror of the heavens? The east bank, where the sun rises, was the land of daily life. The west, where the sun died into the horizon, belonged to the dead and the afterlife. Giza sits exactly on that western threshold, like a watchtower at the edge of day, facing the river of life and the river of stars at the same time. Was that a coincidence or a code? According to the stories, the mystery schools treated this whole plateau as a living temple organism. The pyramids were its mountains, the causeways its arteries, the underground chambers its hidden heart. To workers hauling blocks, it was a construction site. To most villagers, just a royal project. But to the initiated pharaohs and priests, each angle, each alignment, each gate of stone was part of a ritual machine designed to open the duat. Look up. The three main pyramids are not in a straight line. They are offset, just like the three stars of Orion's belt. In Egyptian thought, Orion was linked to Osiris, Lord of Resurrection. For thousands of years, initiates believed that aligning the king's tomb with those stars helped his soul ascend and join the gods. So why here? Because this patch of bedrock let them map Orion, the Nile, and the path of the sun into one single design. Some researchers point out that Giza rests on a massive block of limestone, barely settling over millennia. Others note its near-central position in the Old World. To archaeologists, that is clever site selection. To the mystery schools, it may have been an energy node, a stable anchor where rituals could reliably pierce the veil. In this chapter of our journey into the mystery schools of Egypt, imagine walking not just between pyramids, but between worlds. Hidden relationships link Giza with Heliopolis, Memphis, and other temples, as if the priests drew a secret map of the duat across the land itself. What kind of knowledge lets a culture turn geography into a ritual text? Most importantly, what were the priests protecting behind this design? In this series, we'll find out together. We will move from mainstream archaeology to ancient texts, from stellar maps to the initiatory path, asking not only how these stone mountains were built, but why this exact plateau was chosen as the doorway between earth, sky, and the unseen realm that waits beyond the horizon. And as we descend into those questions, the desert around Giza may start to look less like sand and more like the pages of a forgotten manual for crossing worlds. From tombs to temples of transformation. Walk back for a moment to the version most of us were taught in school. Old Kingdom, 4th Dynasty. The age of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, when Egypt's pharaohs ordered vast tombs of stone to rise from the desert. According to this view, Giza is simply where the royal cemetery expanded, near the capital Memphis, close to quarries of local limestone, with a huge labor force organized along the Nile. Did you know the practical story is actually very convincing? Engineers point to the Giza Plateau's massive bedrock foundation, so stable that the Great Pyramid has settled only centimeters in thousands of years. They note the easy river access for hauling stone, the elevated ground above flood levels, and the short distance to administrative centers that coordinated food, tools, and workers. From this angle, Giza is a logical construction site, not a mystery. But what really happened when those stones were stacked into mountains? Were these only royal coffins on a grand scale, or something stranger? Old legends tell a different story. In temple inscriptions, pyramids are called houses of eternity, stairways to the sky, and Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. Horizons are not endings. They are thresholds. That language hints at a function beyond burial. Initiation, transformation, and ascent. Imagine standing there as the sun sinks behind the western ridge. For thousands of years, Egyptians watched that same light disappear into the desert, then rise again in the east. To them, the west bank of the Nile was the land of the dead, the place where the journey into the Duat began. Placing the pyramids on that western edge turned the whole plateau into a living diagram of the passage from life to death and back to the stars. According to the stories, the pharaohs were not just rulers. They were chief students in a hidden curriculum. Around each pyramid spread temples, causeways, and smaller tombs, forming a vast open-air academy. Here, priests rehearsed the king's passage through the gates of the afterlife. Here, rituals echoed the book of coming forth by day, not as theory, but as choreography walked in stone. Now the frame shifts. What if these were not only tombs, but schools, the ascending passages, the dark inner chambers, the long causeways running from valley temple to pyramid entrance, all become stages in an initiatory drama. The king's body lay at the center, but the real work was on the Ka, Ba, and Ak, the subtle layers of the self learning how to cross worlds. Most importantly, the location itself becomes part of the lesson. Every alignment is a line of the script. The causeways carry the initiate from the lush Nile edge in the east through a controlled desert to the western plateau where the sun dies. The pyramid's high apex reaches toward the circumpolar stars, the imperishables that never set, promising rebirth beyond decay. Location is curriculum, geography is ritual. So if the Giza complex is a teaching text written across the land, who wrote it, and what kind of knowledge did they encode in its angles and orientations? In the next part, we'll follow those lines of stone out into the sky itself, where constellations, meridians, and a hidden global geometry may reveal why this exact patch of desert was chosen as the hinge between Earth and the stars. Who was allowed in? The desert as a closed classroom, where constellations, meridians, and a hidden global geometry may reveal why this exact patch of desert was chosen as the hinge between Earth and the stars. But not everyone was allowed to read that map. On the surface, Giza was loud, bright, and busy. You would have seen workers hauling blocks, artisans carving reliefs, priests pouring incense smoke into the air, ramps, sledges, shouted orders, and public rituals at the valley temples made the plateau look like a holy construction site. That was the visible Giza. Behind it was another version almost no one saw. Did you know that? According to the stories, only a narrow circle of pharaohs, high priests of Ra and Osiris, and hand-picked initiates were ever taught the full pattern encoded in the desert. For thousands of years, the real curriculum of Giza was passed mouth to ear, inside hidden chambers and behind sealed doors, while everyone else walked past the stones without knowing what they were standing on. In the cities of the Nile, education looked very different. In Memphis or Heliopolis, scribal schools trained boys to copy hieroglyphs and numbers from wooden boards. Temple schools drilled priests in hymns, offerings, and the calendar. It was practical, powerful knowledge, but still part of the ordinary world. Giza was something else. It was the graduate school of the soul, where the subject was the afterlife itself. Here, the lessons were not about taxes or harvests. They were about gates in the Duat, the names of guardians, and the secret routes through darkness. Old legends tell a different story from the tourist brochures, that initiates rehearse death while still alive, using the plateau as a vast simulator of the underworld journey. Most importantly, the goal was not just to preserve a royal corpse. The aim was to train the kings Ba and Ka to move with precision through the Duat, to speak the right words at each gate, to survive the weighing of the heart, and finally to join the imperishable stars circling the northern sky. A human ruler was meant to be refined into a cosmic being, an Ak blazing among the constellations. Imagine being one of the very few allowed into that training. It is night. Your eyes are covered. You feel the cool stone of the causeway under your feet as priests take your arms and lead you west, away from the river. Voices rise around you, chanting star names: Orion, Sirius, the circumpolar ones, as the sounds echo between walls and then fall into the open silence of the desert. Behind you, the Nile world glows with lamps and noise. Ahead, only darkness and sand. This is why the West Bank mattered. Every step from the bright living east to the stark western plateau reenacted the passage from day into night, from breath into stillness. The very choice of this desert, facing the setting sun, turned the landscape into a gate. Giza was not just a place, it was a threshold classroom, a closed school where the earth's edge met the sky. But if the desert itself was part of the lesson, how did the stars above complete it? What really happened when those hidden schools aligned a king's journey with Orion and the imperishable north? We'll find out together when we follow their celestial map in the next section. Listening to the ancients, Plutarch, priests, and the starry Nile. To follow that map, we need a guide. And strangely, one of the best guides to Egypt's sacred landscape is not a pharaoh, but a Greek writer walking its temples long after the pyramids were built. His name was Plutarch. Around the 1st-2nd century CE, he wrote a mysterious little book called On Isis and Osiris. On the surface, it reads like philosophy and myth, but hidden inside are echoes of what Egyptian priests once whispered about their gods, their stars, and even their river. Plutarch tells us that according to the stories, the Egyptians saw Osiris not only as a murdered king, but as a presence in the sky. He links Osiris with the constellation we call Orion. Isis, in his account, is associated with Sirius, the blazing star that heralded the Nile flood, and the Nile itself. Plutarch reports that many Egyptians regarded their river as an earthly image of the heavenly river, a reflection of the Milky Way flowing above. Did you know this creates a kind of cosmic triangle? A sky god in Orion, a sky river in the Milky Way, and below, a real river cutting Egypt in two. If priests believed the Nile mirrored the heavens, then choosing a precise stretch of its west bank for the greatest pyramids starts to look less like convenience and more like deliberate design. But Plutarch is only one voice. For thousands of years before him, Egyptian texts, carved in stone, were already mapping a structured, navigable other world. Inside the pyramid of Unas, around the 24th century BCE, we find the pyramid texts. Hundreds of tightly packed spells and hymns. They describe the dead king rising to the circumpolar, imperishable stars, those that never set, eternally circling the north. These are not vague prayers. They speak of specific gates, ladders, and doors of the sky. The king sails across celestial waters, passes guardians, and takes his place among the undying stars. It sounds less like a dream and more like a training manual for a precise journey. Later, the coffin texts expand this hidden curriculum. Thousands of spells now describe the duat with almost geographical detail. Fields of reeds where the soul harvests grain, lakes of fire that must be crossed safely, and sequences of gates that open only when the right names are spoken. The afterlife becomes a vast, charted landscape with channels, islands, and checkpoints. Most importantly, when we place Plutarch's Sky River hints beside these older star journey spells, a pattern appears. If Osiris is Orion, if the Milky Way is a celestial Nile, and if the duat has mapped fields and lakes, then building pyramids on the west bank opposite certain stars may have been an act of cosmic cartography. What kind of knowledge lets priests turn a river valley into a star map? Were Giza, Saqqara, and the great temples arranged as earthly markers of Orion's path and the soul's ascent? In the next section, we'll find out together how the Nile, the Belt of Orion, and the West Bank necropolis might lock into one grand stellar design. The West Bank threshold, where the sun dies and souls depart. If the Nile was a celestial mirror, then its banks were not equal. One side belonged to the living, the other to the dead. Did you know the Egyptians watched the sun's path so closely that it became the script for the soul's entire journey? Every day, the same drama unfolded. In the east, the sun rose newborn, blazing out of the horizon, like a god stepping from the womb. At noon, it ruled the sky at the height of power. Then slowly, it sank toward the west, bleeding color into the river, disappearing beneath the edge of the world. To the Egyptians, this was not a metaphor. This was Ra himself, sailing his solar bark through life, death, and rebirth. When the disk vanished in the west, they believed Ra was entering the duat, the hidden underworld of tunnels, chambers, and gates. All night he struggled through serpents and darkness, only to be reborn again at dawn. For thousands of years, this cycle taught a simple but terrifying lesson. Everything that lives must set in the west. So, a pattern appears. The great cities of the living, Memphis, later Thebes, cluster the fertile East Bank. But the vast necropolis, the cities of the dead, almost always rise from the West Bank. Giza, Saqqara, Abu Sir, the Valley of the Kings. Old legends tell a different story than simple practicality. The West was not just available land, it was the land of the setting sun, the threshold to the Duat, the place where souls followed Ra into the night. Now, focus on Giza itself. The plateau sits like a stone balcony on the western desert edge, directly above the floodplain. Below, the Nile once flowed closer, its waters glittering with sunrise. Above, the rock lifts us away from the green fields into a stark, silent desert. One step, we stand among palm trees and canals. A few hundred steps more, and it already feels like leaving the human world behind. According to the stories, this was not an accident. Imagine a royal procession. The pharaoh dies, or a new king is crowned. Priests, relatives, and initiates gather on the lush East Bank among temples and gardens. Then the body, or the living king in a coronation rite, is ferried across the Nile, drifting westward with the setting sun. They land at a harbour by the pyramid complex, then move in a slow, chanting line up the stone causeway toward the plateau. That walk is a ritual in stone, green to gold, water to rock, village sounds to desert silence. The causeway becomes a training corridor, a rehearsed passage from life into the afterlife. Most importantly, it turns the landscape itself into a mystery school exercise. Every step is a lesson in letting go. But this raises a deeper question. If the entire West Bank was the realm of the dead, why here? Why this exact plateau, at this precise bend in the river, guarded by the Sphinx and crowned with pyramids? What kind of knowledge convinced priests that this threshold was uniquely potent, a doorway unlike any other stretch of desert? In the next section, we'll find out together why Giza's position may tap into forces far beyond the Nile Valley, and perhaps beyond Earth itself. Stone on the spine of the world, bedrock, latitude, and hidden nodes. To answer that, we have to leave the temples for a moment and listen to the ground itself. Because before Giza was a spiritual school, it was an engineering miracle, and the secret begins not in the sky, but under our feet. The entire plateau is one enormous block of limestone bedrock, a natural altar rising above the Nile floodplain. Did you know the Great Pyramid has only settled a few centimeters in more than 4,000 years? For a structure weighing millions of tons, that is almost impossible on soft ground. On shifting alluvium, the whole monument would tilt, crack, and slowly tear itself apart. Here, that does not happen. The stone beneath is dense, stable, and dry. No hidden marshes, no creeping mud, just a solid spine of the earth. The builders carved down into that spine, locking the courses of the pyramid into bedrock so that each block presses into a foundation that barely moves. From a purely practical view, it is the safest place to stack a mountain of stone and trust it to stand for thousands of years. But what really happened when priests looked at this same plateau? They did not only see geology, they saw a meeting point, a raised island between desert and river, between the living fields of the east and the necropolis of the west, where the sun dies each evening and begins its hidden journey through the Duat. Now, pull back. Imagine a sudden cut to a satellite view. The camera races upward, Egypt shrinking, the Nile turning into a thin green line. Africa and Eurasia unfold like a single, ancient continent. Near the middle of this old world landmass, almost on a central latitude, a tiny dot marks Giza. From above, it feels deliberate, as if someone placed a marker at the heart of the map long before satellites existed. Researchers have noticed that the Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions, its sides facing true north, south, east, and west with astonishing precision. Some have argued that meridians and great circle paths through Giza create a kind of geodesic crossroads, a quiet organizing node in the skin of the planet. Is it coincidence, or a hidden kind of knowledge about the world's shape? According to the stories of the mystery schools, such a place would not be random. A high, stone-rich plateau, anchored in bedrock, overlooking the river that carried life, sitting at a crossroads of land routes and celestial alignments, would be read as an energy node, a navel of the world, a place where currents from heaven and earth braid together. How would priests confirm that? Not with machines, but with rituals. They watched star risings over the horizon, tracking how shadows from poles and temple walls moved through the seasons. They listened to the voice of the stone, striking it, walking it at dawn and midnight, feeling where sound rang clear and where it dulled. Most importantly, they tested the veil. Night after night, they fasted, chanted, and lay upon the rock in trance, asking, where does the boundary thin? Where do dreams sharpen? Where do visions come easily? Where do the gates of the afterlife feel close enough to touch? Old legends tell a different story than simple trial and error. They speak of priests who could sense subtle currents in the ground, who mapped lines of power the way sailors map winds. To them, this plateau was not just convenient. It was chosen. So we have two readings of the same place. Engineers see unbeatable bedrock and ideal latitude. Initiates see a stone-on-stone temple built on the spine of the world. But were these really separate viewpoints, or two halves of one science? In the next section, we'll find out together how the sky itself may have finished the blueprint, and why the stars above Giza were treated as active partners in the design. As above, so below, Orion's belt and the river of stars. If the bedrock and latitude gave the architects their canvas, the sky seems to have given them the pattern. Did you know the three great pyramids at Giza do not form a perfect straight line? Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure step across the plateau in a slightly staggered row, with the smallest shifted off to the side, as if copying something already drawn in the darkness above. Now imagine standing there around 2500 BCE. The desert is silent. The air is cold. Over the horizon rises Orion. 3 bright stars, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, Mintaka, burn in his belt, not in a neat line, but in the same curious offset we see in stone on the ground. Most of us grew up believing this was a coincidence of engineering, but old legends tell a different story. To the Egyptians, Orion was not just a pattern of lights. It was the shining body of Osiris himself. Osiris was the lord of the afterlife and rebirth, the god whose body was cut apart, scattered, and then reassembled by Isis. According to the stories, this remembering of the god restored the cosmic order and opened the way for souls to live again. Look at Orion's belt through that lens. 3 separate lights, distinct yet bound in a hidden geometry, like pieces of a divine body stitched back together in the sky. What kind of knowledge turns a constellation into a roadmap for resurrection? Now, stretch the vision wider. The Milky Way arches overhead like a pale river. The Nile flows below, a dark band cutting through Egypt. Many researchers have noticed the eerie parallel. The Nile as the river of stars, the Milky Way reflected on Earth. On its west bank, the side of sunset, tombs, and the afterlife. The 3 pyramids sit where Orion's belt would touch the ground if the heavens were laid over the land. As above, so below becomes literal cartography. In this popular visualization, the Giza Plateau is not random real estate. It is the earthly endpoint of a celestial alignment, Orion's belt in stone, beside the river of stars in water, facing the eternal cycle of sunrise and sunset, a training ground for pharaohs and priests who expected their souls to rise among the imperishable stars. Of course, not every Egyptologist agrees on the precision of this so-called Orion correlation theory. Some argue the match is too rough, that the angles do not line up perfectly, that we are seeing patterns we want to see. But what really happened in the minds of the ancient designers, the pyramid texts, carved deep inside hidden chambers, speak again and again of the king ascending to the sky, joining Orion, sailing with the gods on the celestial river. Most importantly, these texts describe the afterlife as a stellar destination, not just an underground realm. If you were designing a school where souls train to become stars, where would you place your stone temples? Would you not let the sky itself point the way, building your pyramids exactly on Earth's mirror of Orion and the Milky Way, so that every ritual journey began already halfway to the heavens? In the next section, we'll find out together how walking that mirrored landscape may have been a step-by-step initiation, turning the Giza complex into a living map of the soul's ascent. The desert labyrinth, causeways, temples, and hidden chambers. So, if the whole plateau is a mirror of the sky, how do you actually walk it? Not as a tourist with a camera, but as an initiate in a living ritual machine. Picture the journey beginning at the Nile. Ancient harbors once lined the eastern edge of the plateau, where boats carrying the body of a pharaoh or the living body of an initiate slipped in from the river of life. From there, the path turns west into the land of sunset and the dead. But what really happened along that path? Did you know the pyramids were never meant to stand alone? At the foot of each great pyramid lay a valley temple near the water's edge, connected to a mortuary temple by a long, often covered causeway. These are not random walkways. They are stone corridors of transition. We move from bright river light into narrowing passages, up toward the looming bulk of the pyramid itself, passing subsidiary pyramids, boat pits, and finally the silent gaze of the Sphinx, guarding the threshold like a stone question. Archaeologists have slowly uncovered this entire system. Workers' villages south of the Sphinx show where the builders, and possibly later students of the mystery schools, lived, trained, and prepared offerings. Gigantic boat pits with full-sized solar barks hint at ritual journeys across both water and sky. Most importantly, ground-penetrating radar has mapped cavities beneath the plateau, while muon tomography has revealed hidden voids inside the Great Pyramid, including a vast unexplored space above the Grand Gallery. Old legends tell a different story about these places, that they were not just tomb architecture, but training grounds. Now follow that idea inside. The air cools, the light disappears. We enter a sloping passage so low we must bend, stone pressing close on every side. The floor rises under our feet in the ascending passage, then suddenly opens into the Grand Gallery, a high echoing ramp that swallows our footsteps. Narrow crawl spaces lead to hidden chambers. Shafts pierce the stone, aiming at stars linked with Osiris and the imperishable circumpolar gods. This is not just a building. It feels like a labyrinth designed to break our sense of direction and then rebuild it around the heavens. According to the stories, many of these tight, awkward, even frightening spaces were used while the pharaohs were still alive. Imagine priests leading an initiate through the dark, reciting gate spells from the Book of Coming Forth by day, rehearsing the journey through the duat while the heart still beat. Every turn, every chamber, every hidden gate became a rehearsal of death and rebirth. Deep inside, torches flicker against polished limestone. A priest whispers the last instruction. Then, one by one, the flames are pinched out. Total darkness. No sound, but the blood in the ears. Alone in the stone throat of the pyramid, at the exact crossing point of earth and sky, an initiate begins to speak star names into the black. Which gates will answer back? We'll find out together in the next chamber of this mystery. Why hide the map? The deepest secret behind the sand. In that darkness, another question waits with the initiate. Why hide all this? It is one thing to keep the building tricks secret. Quarry routes, ramp designs, the exact angle of a limestone block. But what really happened here was different. The greatest secret of these schools was not how to raise a pyramid. It was why this pyramid had to stand in this exact place on Earth. Did you know that for thousands of years, royal architects and priests guarded site plans like sacred spells, not just blueprints of chambers, but alignments to stars, to the Nile, to distant temples? To reveal the full pattern was to reveal the map. And if Giza is a map, we have to ask a more dangerous question. What kind of knowledge does that map unlock? Imagine being told that the ground beneath your feet is not just rock, but a script. The Nile mirroring the Milky Way, the West Bank reserved for the dead, where the sun itself dies every evening. The three great pyramids echoing Orion's belt, the constellation of Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. Walk that landscape correctly, and you are not just visiting monuments. You are rehearsing the soul's journey through the duat. So we return to the haunting refrain. What did they learn here? According to the stories, the plateau was not only a building site, it was the textbook, the temple, and the examination hall. Each causeway a sentence, each shaft a line of sacred text, each alignment a question the soul had to answer when it faced the gates beyond death. If the priests taught that the Duat had 12 gates, then Giza was the diagram, a living diagram that only the initiated could read. Most importantly, a diagram that, if misused, could twist the journey. What happens if someone opens the wrong gate, calls the wrong name in the dark? Old legends tell a different story from the safe museum version. They whisper that the underworld is precise. Make a mistake, and the soul pays. Now, the secrecy makes a different kind of sense. Power, first of all. Whoever mastered this invisible geography could claim more than a throne. A pharaoh who knew the hidden path could say, "I alone can guide Egypt safely through death." That is authority no army can match. Then, safety. If rituals in these chambers trained consciousness to slip between worlds, handing that to the unprepared would be like giving fire to a child in a dry forest. And beyond both lies sanctity. The Duat was not a tourist attraction. To the priests, it was a holy field that could be profaned by careless feet. But these questions only lead deeper. To understand why the pyramids stand exactly where they do, we have to leave our modern map behind. We have to step into the Egyptian mind, into their sky of gods and rivers of stars, and walk with them through their cosmology of death, the Duat, and the 12-fold underworld. That is the terrain we enter next. Mapping the Duat, Egypt's invisible underworld. To the Egyptians, this terrain was not a metaphor. It was a destination. Death, for them, was not an ending at all, but the beginning of a dangerous journey through a hidden realm beneath and beyond the Nile, the Duat. Did you know they imagined this underworld as carefully organized as Egypt itself? Not a vague cloud realm, a mapped country. It had regions and provinces, rivers and islands, caverns and fields, all threaded with gates that opened only to those who knew the right words. In their minds, the afterlife was a structured landscape, as real as the desert at Giza. This Duat was a world of extremes. Picture dark caverns pressing in like stone coffins, then opening suddenly into fiery lakes that glowed red against the black. Imagine fields of reeds stretching into a silver horizon, serpents coiled around small islands of light, and narrow boats gliding along black waters that reflected no moon. Above it all, stars shone in impossible skies, constellations burning even in the deepest tunnels of night. According to the stories, no one simply wandered through this mystery. The Duat was divided into stages, like a ritual curriculum. Texts, such as the Amduat and the Book of Gates, described the night as 12 distinct hours, 12 hidden chambers of time. Each hour had its own gate. Each gate had guardians with terrifying faces and precise demands. To pass, the soul and the sun god Ra had to speak the correct names, perform the right rituals, and survive the tests, waiting in each region. Most importantly, the king's destiny was not just to drift through this realm, but to travel beside Ra. The pharaoh was expected to accompany the sunbark through all 12 hours of night, confront the coils of chaos serpent Apophis, and help defeat darkness so that dawn could rise again. That required more than faith. It required exact knowledge, names of demons, shapes of gates, routes of rivers, and spells that worked like passwords. Old legends tell a different story than a simple "rest in peace." They speak of rulers and priests training like navigators of the invisible. What kind of knowledge lets a soul steer through an underworld? Every detail mattered. Mispronounce a name, forget a guardian's title, turn left instead of right at a fork in the black waters, and the journey could end in oblivion. But what really happened when these beliefs met the physical world? If the duat was a charted voyage, then an obvious idea follows. Why not build a rehearsal map on Earth? For thousands of years, priests on the West Bank treated the desert as a mirror of the night. Temples, causeways, and pyramids could become a ritual duat, a training ground where initiates walked the route while still alive, passing through gates of stone so their souls would recognize the gates of darkness. And if the underworld had 12 regions, could Egypt's sacred landscape itself be hiding a 12-fold map? We'll find out together as we step from mythic rivers back onto the Giza Plateau and watch how the duat begins to rise from the sand. The 12 gates and the stone horizon. We're back on the Giza Plateau, but now we're looking at it with underworld eyes. Did you know that, to an initiate, this was not just a construction site, but a stone version of the night itself? A horizon frozen in limestone. Egyptian texts speak of the 12 hours of night, 12 regions of the duat that every soul had to cross. Each hour was a gate. Each gate had a guardian. A serpent coiled around a doorway of fire, a lion-headed being with a knife, a silent ferryman waiting in a shadowed canal. To pass, the traveller had to know the guardian's secret name and speak it without error. The pattern was always the same: encounter, recognition, response, reward. First, the soul met a terrifying presence blocking the path. Then came recognition, naming the guardian, identifying its form, proving that this was not a random wanderer, but someone trained. Only then could the correct response be given: a spell, a phrase, a ritual gesture, sometimes an offering. If the answer matched the mystery, the reward was safe passage, new guidance, or even transformation into a more radiant being. Most importantly, everything depended on precision. A single missed word, a forgotten epithet, and the gate snapped shut. This was not vague belief. It was a technical art of the afterlife. Old legends tell a different story from simple tombs and treasures. They describe a curriculum where priests and pharaohs rehearsed these encounters again and again until the duat's map lived inside them. Now imagine walking the Giza complex as one of those initiates. You arrive by boat on the Nile, stepping from the living east to the western shore of the dead. The valley temple rises as your first threshold, cool and dim, its polished stone swallowing the desert glare. From there, a long causeway pulls you forward, an artificial canyon of masonry, guiding your steps like a river of stone toward the pyramid's mortuary temple. And, beyond that, its inner chambers. What if each of these architectural breaks was a gate, encounter, a doorway, a narrowing corridor, a sudden shift from light to darkness? Recognition, carved names of gods, star ceilings, alignment markers whispering which power ruled this zone. Response, spoken hymns, precise footsteps, offerings placed in niches. Reward, deeper access, new chambers, a rising sense that the body was still on earth, but the mind was already walking the duat. Look at the alignments. The The pyramids lock onto the cardinal directions, their sides facing north, south, east, and west, like a giant compass. Narrow shafts from the king's chamber point towards circumpolar stars, the imperishable ones that never set, while the layout of the three great pyramids echoes Orion's belt, the realm of Osiris. Some causeways point to key solar events, like the rising or setting sun on particular days, tying each processional path to a moment in the cosmic cycle. According to the stories, the horizon itself was called Akhet, a place where sky and earth open to each other. If Giza is a manufactured Akhet, a stone horizon, could each major structure mark a stage in an invisible 12-fold journey, a training route where the 12 hours of night were walked under open sky? And if that is true, then what hidden lesson waits at the final gate, the very heart of the Great Pyramid, still sealed in silence, training for death while still breathing? To the mystery schools, that silent heart of stone was not just a destination. It was a training ground. Did you know, in this older view, you were never supposed to wait for death to learn the duat? The greatest secret was that the afterlife was a curriculum, and the Giza Plateau was the classroom. Temples, causeways, and the desert itself became a living simulator of the underworld, a place where pharaohs rehearsed dying while still breathing. According to the stories, the primary students were the pharaohs. They were the ones expected to become Osiris and lead the nations safely through both this world and the next. Around them stood high priests, masters of ritual and astronomy, who acted as guides. Closer still, in the inner circles, a narrow group of adepts, trained in hidden chambers, walking dark corridors, fasting, chanting, and facing carefully designed terrors. Outside all of this, the general population joined the outer rituals, festivals, public prayers, funerary processions, without ever seeing the deeper school. Most importantly, the training depended on memory, not casual memory, but total, embodied recall. Initiates learned the earliest pyramid texts, the prototypes of what later became the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Line after line named the 12 hours of night, the lakes of fire, the serpent-filled caverns, the gates and their guardians. Each guardian demanded a specific name, a precise spell, a declaration of purity. Forget a single word, and in their imagination, the journey failed. Imagine a young initiate standing in a dark stone chamber under the plateau. No torches, only the weight of limestone pressing in from every side. A priest's voice echoes the names of gates, the formulas to open them. The initiate repeats them over and over until the tongue moves faster than thought, until the map of the duat is burned into the nervous system. This was spiritual muscle memory, built long before the final breath. Now picture a different scene. Night on the Giza Plateau. The wind carries sand across the rock. Torches flicker against the faces of the pyramids, turning their angles into shifting gold and shadow. A procession moves from the Nile toward a valley temple at the base of the causeway, the first gate of the ritual journey. Drums beat slowly. Priests in leopard skins chant hymns to Osiris as the chosen initiate is led inside, veiled, as if already dead. Within the temple, columns rise like stone reeds from a primordial swamp. The air is thick with incense. The initiate lies on a low bier, surrounded by chanting. In that moment, the body is treated as a corpse, the spirit as a traveler. Guided through chambers that grow darker and narrower, the initiate descends symbolically, reciting the memorized texts at each threshold. A wrong answer means the procession halts. A correct one opens the next door. But what really happened is even stranger when we tie it back to place. This training only made sense here, at a junction where sun, river, desert, and stars formed a single diagram. To the east, the Nile shimmered like a celestial mirror, echoing the Milky Way. To the west, the necropolis marked the land of sunset and the dead. Above, Orion's belt rose over the three great pyramids, a skyscript of Osiris and the soul's ascent. Giza was not random. It was engineered as a full-scale model of the cosmic journey. So when a pharaoh walked from riverbank to valley temple, up the causeway and into the pyramid, he was not just moving through stone. He was stepping through a map of the Duat, laid out on earth itself. If life was the rehearsal and death the performance, then this plateau was the stage. But if the entire landscape was a script, who designed it? And how far did this training really go beyond the body? Walking the gates, precision, mastery, and the star ascent. To answer that, we have to walk the gates ourselves. Imagine starting at the Nile, the river glinting like a band of starlight. You move west toward the land of sunset and the dead. But in these mystery schools, this was not just a funeral route. It was a training ground. At every turn, the architecture forced a pattern. Approach a threshold, face a challenge, give the right response, and earn a reward. Did you know this pattern mirrors the 12 gates of the Duat? In the texts, a soul approaches a gate guarded by a lion, a serpent, or a blazing deity. It must speak a secret name, recite a spell, or hold absolute silence. One mistake, and the soul is cut off. One perfect response, and the next region of the afterlife opens. Now translate that into stone. You step into the pyramid's descending passage. The light of the entrance vanishes behind you. The ceiling lowers. The air cools. This is the first constriction, a physical echo of the underworld's narrow gates. To continue, an initiate had to master their own fear in this confined tunnel, to keep the inner state steady when the body wanted to turn back. Then comes the turn upward. The tight ascending passage rises, still cramped, still pressing in. This is a gate of compression. Old legends tell a different story than simple engineering. According to the stories, this narrowing was a test, a ritual birth canal the soul had to remember how to pass through. The correct password here was not only a spoken formula, but the ability to move through constriction without losing focus. Suddenly, the grand gallery opens above you. The space explodes upward into a steep, echoing corridor. Each step is a climb toward a higher realm. The walls lean, the ceiling soars, and your own footsteps boom like a drum. This was not random design. It was a deliberate escalation, a vertical gate. The challenge now is endurance and balance, body and breath, aligned with the rising path. At the top, another threshold. Beyond lies the king's chamber, a room tuned like an instrument. Here, in the red granite womb tomb, the final ordeal of the ritual ascent unfolded. For thousands of years, Priests warned that mispronouncing a name, forgetting a line, or failing to hold the right inner stillness in this chamber was a kind of symbolic death. The stakes were high because they believed the duat worked the same way. Most importantly, this sequence did not stand alone. From valley temple to causeway, from low passages to high gallery, the whole Giza complex behaves like a spine of 12 invisible gates. We may never map each one precisely, but the logic is there. Staged ascent, escalating ordeal, precision at every step. The journey was not over. The shafts and alignments point outward, toward Orion and the circumpolar imperishables. In the minds of these schools, the last gate did not open into stone at all, but into the stars themselves. What waited there, in that silent turning sky, is the next mystery we have to face. Echoes across the world, other mystery schools and sacred maps. If the last gate opened into the stars, then here is the next question. Were the Egyptians the only ones who tried to draw the heavens onto the earth? Or have other cultures, in their own ways, turned landscapes into secret maps of the soul? Did you know that in ancient Greece, initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries walked a very specific road from Athens to Eleusis? It was not just a commute. It was a ritual journey. Along that sacred way, shrines, bridges, and markers appeared in a fixed order, each turn and stop acting like a verse in a hidden scripture. Priests led processions through gates, across rivers, into dark halls, so that the land itself became a rehearsal for descent, loss, and eventual rebirth. On Crete, the palace of Knossos held another kind of map, the labyrinth. Most of us grew up hearing it as a monster story, but old legends tell a different story beneath the surface. A twisting, turning path that folds back on itself is also a perfect symbol for the mind facing its own fears. Walking such a maze, real or imagined, forces an initiate to confront disorientation, panic, and, finally, a center. What kind of knowledge waits at that center is the question that echoes across many schools. For thousands of years, people have built megalithic circles, ziggurats, and stepped temples that do something very strange. They talk to the sky. Stones at places like Stonehenge frame solstice sunrises. Ziggurats in Mesopotamia rise as artificial mountains aligned to the cardinal directions. Sacred peaks in the Andes and Himalayas are chosen because certain stars rise over them at precise times. Place and sky are locked together as if the earth is answering a pattern written above. And Egypt is no exception. If we zoom out from Giza, another hidden geometry appears. To the northeast stood Heliopolis, the great solar cult center of Ra, where priests watched the rising sun and measured the year. To the south lay Memphis, the administrative heart, where pharaohs ruled the living world. Giza sits between. On the west bank, where the sun dies each evening, spiritual source, political power, and initiatory tomb temples form a triangle of influence spread over the Nile Valley. This is not just geography. It is a ritual map. Heliopolis anchors the celestial fire, Memphis manages the human realm, and Giza stages the passage into the afterlife. According to the stories, initiates could read this landscape the way others read papyrus scrolls. Architecture and alignment became a visible scripture, teaching through gates, causeways, and chambers instead of ink. But here is the pattern interrupt. What if this is not only an ancient habit? Imagine looking at a modern city the same way. Skyscrapers rising like glass ziggurats, rivers cutting through business districts, highways crossing like great causeways, banks at the center, hospitals at the edge, cemeteries pushed to the west. What unconscious myths are we building into our streets? Are we still tracing paths of ascent, descent, and rebirth without realizing it? Most importantly, if Giza is one of the clearest surviving maps, what happens when we learn to read it again? In the next part, we step closer into that triangle of power to see how its lines converge on the plateau itself, and why that exact patch of desert became the stage for the greatest initiation of all. Returning to the plateau, seeing Giza with initiate eyes. So now we cross the river again. Imagine standing on the eastern bank of the Nile at dawn, the city behind us fading, the water ahead turning from black to molten gold. For thousands of years, this line of water has been more than a river. To the Egyptians, it was a living border, life and sunrise in the east, death and the setting sun in the west. We push off in a small boat. The current carries us toward the realm of the dead. As we glide across, the map we have been building suddenly comes alive. The Nile below mirrors the Milky Way above. The western horizon is no longer just desert. It is the threshold of the Duat. Did you know that, according to the stories, the souls of pharaohs were believed to rise like stars from this very side of the river? In that worldview, crossing west is not just travel, it is a rehearsal for the final journey. The boat scrapes the shore. Sand crunches under our feet. Ahead, the Giza Plateau rises, not as a random hill, but as a spine of limestone bedrock, a natural altar fused to the earth. Modern engineers see perfect foundations here, where the Great Pyramid has barely shifted over millennia. The ancient priests saw something else, a fixed point, strong enough to anchor a ladder to the stars. At the very lip of the cultivated land sits the Sphinx. Half lion, half human, it waits where green ends and desert begins, a liminal guardian carved directly from the living rock. Old legends tell a different story than simple erosion and quarrying. They speak of a watcher at the first gate, a being that looks east to the rising sun and west toward the necropolis, holding the line between worlds. From the Sphinx, stone causeways rise towards the pyramids like frozen rivers. In daylight, they are ramps. In the imagination of the mystery schools, they become the underworld streams of the Duat, carrying the king's car from valley temples. Those first gates on the river's edge, up through a sequence of rituals. Each courtyard, each hall, another chamber of testing, another password, another chance to align with Ma'at. Above them, the pyramids themselves stand as star ladders. Their bases are locked into the planet's most stable stone. Their sides point with uncanny precision to the cardinal directions. Their arrangement echoes Orion's belt, the constellation of Osiris, so that river and sky, Osiris and Nile, pyramid and star all line up in a single act of sacred geometry. Here, practical engineering, royal propaganda, and mystery school cosmology converge. Giza is close to the heart of the old world's landmass. It commands visibility, logistics, and labor. But most importantly, it satisfies a more secret requirement. A place where the West Bank realm of the dead, the spine of bedrock, and the mirror of Orion over the Milky Way all intersect. Of course, not every line is certain. Some star correlations are debated. Some voids inside the Great Pyramid remain unexplored. Many texts are broken, their spells and instructions trailing off into silence. But what kind of coincidence repeats itself from Heliopolis to Memphis to Giza, always tying temples, stars, and the Nile into one continuous initiatory map? We'll find out together, because the plateau may not be finished speaking. New scans keep hinting at hidden chambers, sealed passages, and perhaps forgotten gates still waiting in the rock. In the next part, we step off the plateau's surface and descend into the passages beneath our feet to see what those secrets might complete, what the pyramids ask of us now. So where does all of this leave us, standing here at the edge of the plateau, with hidden chambers below and the stars still burning above? We began with a simple question. Why here? Why this slice of desert on the west bank of the Nile, facing the sunrise cities across the water? For thousands of years, people have answered with logistics, politics, or the ego of pharaohs. But old legends tell a different story, and the evidence we followed starts to agree. We traced the West Bank as a boundary line, the place where the living world of fields and markets gives way to the land of the setting sun. We watched the pyramids mirror Orion's belt, calling on Osiris and the promise of rebirth in the night sky. We stood on the limestone bedrock and felt how still it is, how the whole complex rests on a single foundation that barely moves while empires rise and fall. Then we overlaid the invisible maps, the Duat with its 12 gates, the processional causeways as rivers of ritual, the links to Heliopolis, Memphis, and the other great schools that turned the Nile Valley into a three-dimensional textbook of the afterlife. Did you know that when we walk that landscape in order, we are moving through a lesson plan written in stone? Most importantly, a pattern emerged. The pyramids were not dropped randomly into the desert. They were placed with surgical precision at a crossroads of river, sun, stars, and stone. According to the stories, this crossroads was chosen to train human beings to die before they died, to rehearse the passage through the Duat while still breathing, and to return changed. So the next time an image of Giza flashes past on a screen or in a book, try a different gaze. Don't just see a tourist postcard of big triangles in the sand. See a ritual map. See the Great Pyramid as a silent teacher, its chambers as exam rooms for the soul. See the entire plateau as a school where pharaohs and priests learn to walk through darkness without losing the thread of who they were. Here is the pattern interrupt. This is not only their story, it is ours. What kind of knowledge would we build into our own lives if we treated them as initiatory architecture? Which places, practices, and paths are our pyramids now? The meditation cushion, the hospital corridor, the moment a relationship ends, the night we choose a new direction. Each one is a small West Bank, a place where an old self sets like the sun and a new one waits just below the horizon. But what really happened if we start living that way, on purpose? If we see every challenge as a gate, every loss as a chamber, every insight as a hidden passage opening in the dark? These pyramids ask us, not just to wonder about their mysteries, but to practice our own, to keep walking the desert between worlds as conscious initiates, not accidental tourists. So as this episode closes, the invitation is simple. Keep questioning the obvious stories. Keep looking at familiar monuments, temples, cathedrals, even city skylines, and asking, what are these training us for? And if this journey has opened something in you, subscribe, return, and step back into this school with us. In the next explorations, we'll find out together what other gates are waiting just beneath the surface of the world we think we know.